Hey, good evening and welcome to another episode of the Roundtable. Today we're talking about integrity. And first, before we begin the show, please go on your Twitter or your Facebook and join this conversation. This is the question I'm asking you tonight. Do you care about the integrity of the leader you're voting in? When you're going to cast your ballot, what are you going to be thinking about? Do you think about the corruption cases that maybe they might be involved in or alleged to be involved in? Who are you going to vote for? And does integrity matter to you? Tweet us at KTN News. I'm at Asha Mwilu on Twitter. Facebook us as well and join the conversation. Tonight at Swiss International in Anamount, we have Prof. Karibu Sana from the National Commission.
National Cohesion.
Yes,
and Integration Commission.
NCIC.
NCIC.
We've been drinking too much tea already. Prof. Naitule, welcome to the show. Bob Mukangi, of course, constitutional lawyer. And we have Suzanne Chivusia from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Welcome. I mean, when we talk about integrity, are we flogging a dead horse or even maybe a horse that wasn't alive to begin with? That's the question everyone is asking. Is this a valid discussion to have right now?
Oh, yes. Why not? And in fact, critically now that you're approaching elections, and I think the question you posed to Kenyans, whether integrity is an issue that stands for them when they decide whom they're going to vote for come August 8th. And again, from a constitutional perspective, we remember as Kenyans that it's now 7 years since we promulgated, or we said this is our new framework of how we are going to live as Kenyans. The contract we signed together, the agreement, and we infused that agreement with the requirement that we are going to have certain values and principles that are going to guide us. And that's why we talk of Article 10 on the principles and national values. Specifically Chapter 6, which talks about leadership and integrity. As Kenyans, we said we want leaders who, of sterling performance, of good moral standing, of excellent conduct. Ethical leaders. And that's why we infuse that aspect, which is quite a novelty. When you look at many constitutions, you don't find a chapter particularized to leadership and integrity. And when we put it in the constitution, we say it's a priority. It's something of importance. It's something that we as Kenyans, we are going to observe as a priority in choosing leaders, whether elected leaders or appointed leaders.
But do you know why I'm posing that question? Because the issue of integrity, even in the run-up to the election, before nomination, this is the time that people are now starting to talk about it more clearly. And one of the reasons is because of your commission. You've gone to the Supreme Court seeking guidance on the guidelines of Chapter 6. I think many people are asking why now?
I think when you talk about leadership and integrity, it's something that has been in the mind of Kenyans for quite some time now. Because if you look at the Constitution, during the Constitution making, Kenyans submitted that we want this type of leaders, and that is why we have that key chapter. With regards to the question as to why now, I think a positive intervention can never really be late. It's now, I think this is the opportune time. It's the best time ever, especially now that we are going towards elections and we are electing our leaders both at county and national level. It's important that we have the sort of leaders that Kenyans had in mind when they were submitting towards the constitution making. And the other thing I want to bring about is you have to look at the political climate and the socioeconomic environment. Look at what is happening now. Almost on a daily basis, the Auditor General is talking about siphoning of funds, public funds. There are issues touching on some of our leaders, their conduct, their moral aptitude.
And that's very valid.
Yes.
But you know, when the commission comes out to seek this guidance right now, after, let's say, the nomination stage is over, what can really be done? Because even the Supreme Court has pushed that hearing date to 14 days from now. By that time, IBC will already have... I don't know what you feel about that, Prof, because I can see you're grinning.
Yeah, I think it's never really too late, like she said, to do an intervention.
Okay.
But I think there's a general weakness. And I like the way the lawyer very brilliantly and passionately talked about all the things that we put, all the good values that we put in the new constitution. And then he said something. He said, we talk about it. And that is the point. We are supposed to live these values, not talk about them. And we are not living these values. And how do I know we are not living these values? Look at the kind of leaders we will elect. We will elect the leaders who have robbed us. We will elect the leaders who fly in the village with helicopters. And they humiliate us by the dust that they generate. These are the people we worship. So if you get one of these Kenyans who has worked diligently in a public service, had an honest small salary, goes home, when you sit in the village market and that person has retired, is passing around, you hear them saying, look at that one, he's completely useless. He had a big job.
And he did nothing.
And he did nothing. Meaning that he's not a thief and therefore he's a bad person.
Yeah.
So this is our problem. The problem is in general. The problem involves the entire 40 million of us because of the kind of values that we hold in dear.
That's true. Right.
That person is our hero. The one who just passed, who he said is useless. He did nothing for himself. In other words, he didn't even steal, and therefore he's useless. So when we have generalized values like that, then the statement, the philosophical statement, that they say a government is an innocent mirror of the people who put it to power. In other words, it merely reflects you. And that now becomes so true.
But right now, is it, what can we do at this point?
Okay, I don't think it is too late. I still want the Commission still is giving Kenyans hope. Because if you look at the Electoral Commission, they have a vetting panel which is still doing its work. And then there was this working group on integrity comprising the Attorney General, I think the Office of the Public Prosecutor, and several other commissions, I think, and institutions. You are all there, NCIC. And they came up with a sort of guideline on what is expected, on sort of a tool to be used to vet our leaders. So it's not too late. We are still interrogating, and the list is still not yet out. And now with the court, the Supreme Court, what the Commission is doing is actually putting impetus into the process so that we can have an advisory opinion from the highest court of the land as to what is the value of this chapter in our constitution. It's not just for cosmetic purposes. Yeah, it is meant to be implemented.
But I really wonder what the political implication of that is if IBC, let's say, finds an aspirant wanting or the integrity wanting. So perhaps I want us to bring in Martin Olo, who's late, like the normal Kenyan, even for this conversation. But first, let's look at the history of this Chapter 6 of the Constitution. Why did we even put it in our Constitution? This is how the situation was in Kenya before the 2010 Constitution.
Under the old constitution, presidential control of the institutions of governance was exercised through unregulated powers of appointment and dismissal. The president could appoint and dismiss public servants in these institutions at will. As a result, while public servants were accountable to the president, they did not think they were accountable to the public. The absence of public accountability in the exercise of power also created an environment in which corruption and impunity thrived. In view of that, there was need to establish standards for the credibility of incumbent and future leaders. Kenyans yearned to have confidence in the constitutional offices. The 2010 Constitution of Kenya, therefore, dedicated a whole chapter to ensure an effective administration that cuts across all leadership ranks. Chapter 6 of the Constitution is on leadership and integrity, and it requires state officers to be guided in their day-to-day conduct by principles of leadership and integrity, which, among other requirements, include being objective and impartial in ensuring that decisions are not influenced by nepotism, favoritism, other improper motives or corrupt practices, being selfless while rendering service solely to the public interest, demonstrating the commitment to the public interest through honesty in the execution of public duties, and the declaration of any personal interest that may conflict with public duties, and being accountable to the public for decisions and actions. Are the rules and principles provided in Chapter 6 of the Constitution adhered to by state officials? What measures have been taken by concerned bodies in ensuring that the rules are adhered to?
Okay, so that's the history of that chapter. That's the reason why we put it in our Constitution. Martin Olo, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Asha, and my apologies for arriving.
For being Kenyan.
No, just for arriving late.
Okay, so we actually want your comment on this. IBC is now going to go to the next stage. Aspirants are submitting their papers and they're going to be cleared to become candidates.
Yes.
If someone is found to not have integrity or to not be ethical, or we don't want them on the ballot because they don't meet the guidelines, what happens politically? Do you think it's possible to actually tell someone you can't run?
I think that, let's be clear, that it's unlikely, highly unlikely, that anybody will be disqualified at this stage on account of integrity, because what is the measure that will be used? Ideally, if you're going to say my certificate is fraudulent, you will have to go through a process for you to say so. So you can't look at it unless, on the face of it, I said I went to University of Nairobi and the University of Nairobi said, no, we don't recognize this, in which case there are no records and no nothing. That is perhaps a good business that can be done. But if for some reason somebody complains about my degree, they must have to go through the entire process in order for this degree to be invalidated or for it to even be challenged. The time we have, we are not likely to see anybody disqualified on account of any of these issues. It could be an allegation, it could be a suspicion, but it will not be possible for anybody to be declared unsuitable unless the courts, or unless there's conviction, or unless there's glaring evidence that has been...
What about the situation of PSC, for instance?
In the fact that, you know what we just saying is explained, sometimes we like occupying ourselves. It is something that we know a carry and go far. Because you see, when you go to vet these people in integrity, you know, when you have a pending case, surely somehow that shouldn't be able to weigh against you. But in our situation, it doesn't. Because the court already pronounced itself on this matter. The court is saying that we live in a country that has no integrity. And that what that means is somebody can leave an allegation against you, and that allegation lands you in a court until you are convicted. And until your appeal is heard and determined, you are still innocent. So that principle, because all the issues around the corruption, they are criminal issues. And since they are criminal issues, and the law requires that you're innocent until proven guilty, then what we are doing now, vetting these people, we are just trying to find something to do, because legally you cannot bar anybody who has not been convicted.
But
perhaps
what I love about what the National Human Rights Commission is doing, and what it has triggered, like you're saying, this conversation that you're having now, and what it's presenting to Kenyans is perhaps the challenge, and inviting them to go beyond what they have been using. If we are to take the nominations as an exercise that was done perfectly, and we assume that Kenyans exercise their minds in choosing whoever they chose, I think in as much as these processes might not yield the fruits that you want in terms of saying so-and-so is not fit and should not be on the ballot paper, I think this is also pushing Kenyans to exercise their civic responsibility. It's also a duty of Kenyans to ensure, and that's why we're talking about Article 10. That article does not apply to politicians only. It applies to all of us as Kenyans. It's something that we have to internalize and say, if I am born of these values and principles, then why should you choose somebody who does not reflect the same?
It almost feels as if we're now pushing this responsibility to the voter, that, you know what, this chapter 6, we've been unable to implement it at institutional level, and now it's up to you, Kenyan, to know that there's this chapter that exists.
I think
in fact, that's exactly how this thing should be. You see, you make a law to cure a mischief. Why are you making the law to cure that mischief? Because naturally, people not living, you know, there is what they call living according to the laws of nature. Because if you live to the laws of nature, you live perfectly. But then the law recognizes that you can do that.
Yes.
So they put the consequences from bad behavior. Now, the weakness in our system is the citizen is not holding people, Kenyans, to account when they exhibit bad behavior. Because if the citizens were to deploy their power of holding you to account, that ballot power, then you will supervise yourself when you are working for the public.
I think Suzanne had a point to that.
I have a point to raise concerning that.
Yeah.
I think what Kenyans are clear about, in the public consciousness, Kenyans know when something is wrong or somebody has done something wrong.
Yeah.
And what has been happening is that people have been getting away with it.
Yeah.
Now, what the commission...
Impunity.
Yeah, what the commission is trying to get the court is actually to now pronounce itself on those standards.
Yes.
Because you see the law as it is, it's quite amorphous. Even when you talk about moral uprightness, whose morals are you talking about? What is the measure? What is the standard? But if the court was able to pronounce itself on it and put maybe certain parameters, then it would make it more visible and more easier to implement. So that is what we are.
Is that
and
what you want Supreme Court to do now?
Yeah, and that is the duty of our courts, to interpret the law, you know, such that it is more in tandem with societal expectations. Because honestly, when this constitution was made and this chapter was inserted, it was there to serve a purpose. So we cannot have business as usual, as if it doesn't exist. People can do whatever they do and get away with it, siphon public property, maybe molest children, for example, grab public land and get away with it, and we just say it is okay.
You know, Aisha, I wish we were talking about another country. You see, mention anybody who is notorious, who has offered themselves for election, and they're in. The primaries have brought them in. Look at what has happened in Kirinyaga. Look at what's happened in Kajiado. Look at what's happened everywhere. Any governor that has issues, main issues, they're back. So this discussion must recognize, and I like where Professor was, there is a disconnect between the Kenyan we know and the Constitution. When you talk about Article 10, that is for some guys who wrote this article my good friend Bob.
Maybe Bob should actually tell us what they were thinking.
Let me put it this way. There is still a disconnect between the aspirations that we have in the Constitution, right from the preamble, and the assumption that the sovereignty is with Kenyans,
the people,
and therefore they are donating it. Kenyans, when you look at them and when you look at their leaders, there is still a disconnection. Leaders are bosses. Leaders are not even the servants. Now, if that's the case, then we will see what we are seeing. So that when you say that, are we now leaving to the voter to decide? Of course, yes. Democracy is not about quality. Democracy is about quantity. It's how many people come and how many vote. That is true whether you're in the US, and that's why you have Trump. That's true in Kenya, and that's why you'll have Songo. And that's true even in Europe. That's why you have confusion around Brexit. So the citizens make decisions, and sometimes their decisions may be rational, but they have made them.
And the Constitution is aspirational.
Yeah.
And that's why you'll always find that disconnect. But with such discussions and other processes, they help the Mwananchi, the institutions to catch up. We keep reminding ourselves of what the roadmap is. But I agree that where we are, the reality of what is in the Constitution and the mindset, the framework of our society, totally different. And we also have to still admit that we are transiting. The old adage of same forest, different monkeys, or vice versa. So we are still there, and it's a journey that we're going through. But we still have to do the much that we can.
But I wonder
to
when we're
get
saying
where
we're
we are heading.
transiting, are we moving forward or backwards? Because sometimes it feels like we're actually not moving forward.
Let me tell you what I say sometimes. I say, one step forward, two, but sometimes I say one step forward, two backward, and 7 sideways for Kenya,
Yeah.
So
let me say this, yeah?
Yes.